Hello and welcome to the Money Meets Mission podcast brought to you by AVPN Academy. I'm your host, Siddharth Chatterjee, and in this podcast series, we learn from leaders and experts to help us amplify our impact as practitioners in social investment. Our conversation today is with the International Justice Mission, or IJM, and it's about understanding their whole system's approach to eradicating modern slavery and taking lessons from their experience to addressing wicked problems in general. I spoke with Sinni Lim, APAC Regional Strategy and Impact Director, and Ray Lee, Executive Director, Singapore and Southeast Asia at IJM. We spoke about how IJM has developed an experience-based model for addressing a problem as intractable as modern slavery and violence, going from the story of the one to a six-dimensional model that has been piloted in various regions and contexts. We then focused on the lessons IJM's work holds for addressing wicked impact problems in general, exploring concepts of replicability, measurement, collaboration, and storytelling. More than anything, this conversation inspired me, both in revealing the terrifying degree of challenge here and the fact that substantial transformative progress is really possible. IJM's story is one that anyone in impact can take heart from, and I hope it unlocks something for you as well. Hi there, Sinni. Hi, Ray. It's amazing to have you both join us here today. To get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and the work that you do at the International Justice Mission?
Yeah, hi, Sid. Thank you so much for having us. I'm happy to kick us off. My name is Sinni, and I'm the Asia Pacific Regional Director for Strategy and Impact at International Justice Mission. And I'm really happy to be with you here today. Thank you so much for having us. Ray, over to you.
Thank you, Sinni. Thanks, Sid and AVPN for inviting us on this podcast and the opportunity to share about what we do at IJM. IJM is headquartered in US. It is a registered nonprofit and it operates globally. Its mission is to actually focus on upstream systemic change, strengthen rules of laws and protection, and also provide holistic care to survivors who have been violated. Violence is an everyday threat for people living in poverty, and IJM's vision is to protect people in poverty and make justice unstoppable. IJM partners with local authorities in 33 program offices worldwide and 19 countries to combat modern-day slavery, to look at sexual exploitation issues, among other forms of exploitation of the poor. So we hope to decrease the amount of violence that exists in such communities so that people can live in freedom and safety.
Thanks both. Ray, you're already getting to the core of the problem, but some of the things that you mentioned, modern slavery and systemic violence, before we get into the ways in which IJM is working on providing solutions to this, could you set the stage as to why this is such a complex issue and why it affects so many different aspects of vulnerability?
As we speak now, there's about close to 50 million people living in modern-day slavery. This can be in the forms of human trafficking and slavery, violence against women and children, or police abuse of power. So at IJM, we deal primarily with two types of violence, what we term as the wicked problems, and they are forced labor slavery and online sexual exploitation of children. So for forced labor slavery, according to the Global Slavery Index in 2023, there are about 15 million people who live in slavery within Asia-Pacific region. More than half of those trapped in forced labor are in Asia and the Pacific as well. So can you imagine these are our neighbors and the people who are fueling our private economy, our growth and multinational supply chains as well. So millions of people are vulnerable to forced labor, not because the protective laws don't exist, but because they are often not enforced. With the lack of protection from justice system and living in poverty, IJM estimates that over 31 million people in Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines, countries that we operate in, are vulnerable to forced labor. And these sectors with forced labor are common to us, such as the palm oil industry, the fishing, the service construction, as well as the factory work industries. So we believe that when Governments prioritize their investments in law enforcement and survivor services that end impunity for illegal operators. The space for abuse can get smaller. We have witnessed that this protection for vulnerable workers can be fueled by the sustainable cycle of justice. What we mean is that, for instance, since 1937, we have rescued over 9,500 survivors of violence and slavery. We have convicted more than 7,200 traffickers and abusers, and we have trained close to 390,000 government and justice system officials and community partners. This means a lot to the children and families who are experiencing the abuse, and this can mean a lot of hope for those who are subjected to abuse as well. It will be safe to go to school, they can run their local small businesses, and they can participate in the local community activities and economies. So over time, this could change nations, and that is the vision that we have at IJM.
Yeah, and that's a really inspiring vision. I think it's something we can all resonate with. In a sense, it is urgent, a problem that's affecting millions of people in such a fundamental way. And that's why IGM's work is so important. Sinni, moving into that work specifically, could you walk us a little bit through IGM's approach to dealing with modern slavery? There's legal protections that are not being enforced. There are many stakeholders at play. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how IGM approaches this challenge.
Yeah, based on our learnings over 27 years, IJM has developed an experience-based model of how we can work with the local governments to achieve protection of the most vulnerable people within that society. So our model has what we call 6 dimensions and 5 phases. And what I'll do is I'll use the example of our program in the Philippines, where we partner with the government to combat the online sexual exploitation of children, to kind of illustrate how our model works and the different components of it. It goes from initial engagement, which is when the government really starts to understand and become aware of the issue. So that's phase 1. And then phase 5 is our ultimate goal, where we end up with full government ownership of the issue and the ability to address the issue in a sustainable way. We also have what we call 6 dimensions, which are the different elements of work that we think need to be addressed in order for protection to be achieved. So the first one is what we call casework. So that's the actual rescue and restoration of the individual survivors. So in this case, it would be the rescuing and the restoring of the children who are the victims of online sexual exploitation, and then bringing the perpetrators to justice through arrests and convictions. So it would be working together with the Philippines police to identify where these children are being kept, getting the arrest warrants, and then conducting the arrests, rescuing the children, usually from these homes of the perpetrators, and then bringing them on that journey of restoration through the aftercare program, working with social workers, and then working with the prosecutors to be able to convict the perpetrators. And in the Philippines, the government takes this issue very seriously. So currently, there is actually a minimum sentence of 15 years for perpetrators who are convicted. So that's the first dimension. But we think that just casework alone is not enough because, our goal is to achieve a sustainable solution to this issue, right? And so we also want to do what we call capacity building. So that's where we strengthen the justice systems that we work with, whether it's by training police officers to be more trauma informed, or working with aftercare workers to be able to have a more consistent, objective way of assessing whether a survivor has been restored. So these are ways that we can help to strengthen the justice system, build the capacity across the justice system. We also want to make sure that we're working with community partners, right? What we call community engagement. When we talk about the issue of the online sexual exploitation of children, it's actually very much a community-based issue. So working with community partners, community leaders, being able to change the norms with which this crime is perceived, that's really important as well if we want to see sustainable change. And then, of course, we have survivor leadership. IGM really believes that survivors are one of the strongest and most important voices because they're the real experts in the crime. They know what needs to change in order for this crime not to happen. We really believe that their voices need to be heard. We actually have worked with survivors in the Philippines to develop the Philippine Survivor Network, and they're a really strong, powerful group of people, survivors of online sexual exploitation of children, and they've been involved in developing policy, providing input into government levels, not just in the Philippines, but also abroad, because the online sexual exploitation of children is a transboundary crime. And then advocacy, so that we can work with the governments to be able to identify where the gaps are and to be able to strengthen that. And then finally, data management, which although may not seem that exciting to some people, but actually it's really important, because if we want to enable the government to be able to sustainably address an issue, they need to be able to know how to measure the crime, to be able to talk about it in a consistent way, to be able to have good data. And so that's an area that we really want to make sure that we're working in. So those are the 6 dimensions. And we believe that by working in these 6 dimensions through the 5 phases, we can actually see protection.
I think what's interesting is there's already a built-in sense of how this project scales and then how it becomes sustainable through the 5 phases. I think we're going to move to an aspect where we're going to understand how we can think about IJM's model as a way of working on wicked problems of various kinds. But before we do that, I think it's a great point to emphasize here, which is that this takes a lot of time and experience. So IJM has been working on these problems in this region 27 years. There's a kind of expertise that working on the ground over these many years leads to for an impact organization. It is shown in the kinds of results that IJM has been able to get, which is really fantastic. And that's just an encouragement to social investors, but everybody in the impact ecosystem also, to leverage the kind of expertise that organizations such as yours have in the specific challenges that you're working on. Now, I just wanted to generalize this a little bit. So there are so many interesting aspects of IJM's approach, but I wanted to pick on a few that really stood out to me. So 3 that come to mind are replicability, measurement, and collaboration. And this is from our conversations previously that I'm pulling on this. So replicability being implementing a model and being able to replicate it across different initiatives. And then measurement being having a very clear way of articulating what is the outcomes that are being looked for, and then having a way of measuring that to know if the program is working or not. And then finally, it's about collaboration. But collaboration is really the way to scale it. And I think with IJM, it's very clear what sustainability means and what it means to have successfully gone through the 5 phases. So that's something that I've been thinking about. The replicability, measurement, collaboration are those elements that you think stand out in IJM's approach?
Yeah, I think that's right, Sid. I mean, just on replicability, I think it follows on a little bit from the protection model that I was talking about just now. And if I take a step back, I will say that when IJM first started 27 years ago, we were actually not really thinking about this, right? We were starting off by just trying to demonstrate that justice was even possible. We were looking at these wicked problems, as you talked about. They seemed insurmountable. This issue of violence against the poor. You know, if you ask a poor girl living in the Philippines, you know, where the prevalence rate in some of the hotspot areas that we were working in of commercial exploitation of children was 1 in 3, it would seem hopeless, right? And in fact, that was the case. Many times we would see people wouldn't even want to report their case, or even if IJM said, hey, we'll help you with your case, they would think like, what's the point? So it was just taking on one case at a time and just like winning one case at a time and just showing that, you know what, justice is possible. At that time, we called it the story of the one. And then we started to see really good results. We heard about people who needed help. We were able to rescue them. We took on these seemingly impossible cases and we're actually winning them. We then started to show justice is possible. Our next step was then to say, well, what about on a systemic level? Can we actually strengthen justice systems, right? Rather than just doing like one by one by one, because rescuing individuals is great. Restoring them is even better. But it's much better if these things don't happen at all. We're very privileged to live in a country like Singapore where people feel safe walking down the street. Children feel safe. Parents feel safe letting their children walk the streets. And that's the level of safety that we hope to be able to achieve. But you need a systemic change in order for that to happen. We realized you need a multidimensional approach, not just a single casework approach. You work with community partners, elevate survivor leaders, make sure that the government have data that they can use. So that's how we developed our protection model. So we piloted that model in various countries around the world. And we've since actually completed 9 pilot projects all over the world, not just in Asia Pacific, that we've seen positive results at the end of that. We've actually seen a reduction in the prevalence of violence in each of these 9 projects by 50 to 86%. If I just pause there for a minute, I think impact of that magnitude is significant. It's really significant. So we now have this ambitious vision of protecting 500 million people. So we know if we know that works, what should we do next? We should take it to try and protect as many people as we can. So that's our next goal.
Amazing. I love the anecdote of the story of the one. To even know whether it's possible to solve a wicked problem initially, it's something you have to prove by right? Going one case at a time. And then your solution evolves as you learn more about the problem, as you're more involved. So it does take a long period of time. And I think part of the lesson is also, even from a social investor perspective, is that when there are organizations that have gained that level of expertise, it's much more efficient to work with them for your impact rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or do it all from the beginning.
Hand in hand with replicability is the issue of measurement. And it's not just experience, it's not just number of years on the ground, it's actually commitment to really measuring that impact, because it's not easy and it actually takes investment. And so one of the things that makes IJM unique, I think, is that especially in a field like modern day slavery, human trafficking, forced labor, where it's a little bit more nebulous in terms of what the outcomes and impacts are, IJM has actually developed what we call a protection measurement framework, which composes of 4 domains. So the first domain is prevalence. So that one we've already heard us talk about, which is how much of this kind of crime is happening in this place, right, in this jurisdiction. At the end of our program, we would expect to see the prevalence go down, and significantly. But it's not enough for us. We want to see performance going up. So that means we actually want to see arrests happening and increasing, rescues happening and increasing, survivors being restored, convictions happening, all of these things, so that we know the justice system is actually doing its work. But number 3, we also want the stakeholders in the justice system to have what we call confidence, whether or not a justice system is working, whether the stakeholders themselves have confidence in the system. And number 4, what we call reliance. If there was somebody who was a victim of this crime, do they believe the justice system will do something about it, works on their behalf? So we believe that if you see prevalence go down, performance of the justice system go up, stakeholder confidence go up, and victim reliance on the system go up, those are 4 pretty good indicators that you have achieved protection. So that's our protection measurement framework. In Tamil Nadu, in India, we actually had a program where we worked against bonded labor slavery. We did a baseline study in 2014. And at that point, 30% of manual laborers were in bonded labor slavery. And because Tamil Nadu is such a large state, that translates to about 463,000 workers. When we completed our end-line study, we found that the prevalence rate had reduced from 30% to 1.4% in our project area. So that's a really significant reduction. And in fact, 4 of the districts in the area where IJM was doing its work found 0 bonded laborers. So that's a really significant change. And that 82% reduction actually translates to 380,000 people who effectively moved from slavery to freedom in 8 years. So I just wanted to share that as a concrete example of what we were talking about just now.
That's amazing. And thanks so much for sharing that. Thanks for going into the measurement aspect of it. One of the things that is really fascinating to see is how IGM has worked on incorporating the elements of not just the outputs, but the outcomes that are important to impact management. I think that's definitely a big challenge in the impact space, is moving from the actual outputs that we do have control over towards the outcomes and finally the impact that actually leads to our core mission being solved. So seeing the prevalence of crime going down, that's of course something that's measurable, and it's a huge part of it. But the other elements, seeing performance going up in terms of law enforcement, and then the more intangible bits, confidence by the stakeholders and reliance of potential victims, or reliance of people on the law enforcement and the system itself. Those are the intangible elements that really go and speak to whether the outcome is being achieved. So we've talked about replicability, we've talked about measurement, and the third element is collaboration, and that of course branches in many ways, but that's ultimately what leads to scale and sustainability. So Ray, if you could tell us a little bit about how IJM thinks about collaboration and your approach there.
Collaboration is key to what we do at IJM, and it underscores the impact and the measurement of it that we achieve on the collective scale. We are very thankful for the generous support from different partners and funders around the world. They are given in many forms, be it the giving of time, talents, resources, funding support towards our programs within Asia, for instance. Raising awareness and understanding of the IJM mission is a critical part of what we do to increase the understanding of modern day slavery, trafficking, and exploitation. But The importance of it is that while we do so, right, we really hope to forge sustainable partnerships with like-minded partners. We want to be able to mobilize support and attention to address critical issues together, but because there's so many other cross-cutting issues as we deal with the issues of modern-day slavery. For instance, the implications of climate, right, in what we do. We also hope to be able to direct resources to be able to understand our program work in Asia and be able to direct resources to support such programs so that they can extend to outright support for the victims and survivors. So as you can see, collaboration is key to our modus operandi at IJM. I want to take this opportunity to thank you and the team at AVPN because it means a lot to us for you to spend the time to learn about our work. You have helped to advocate on our behalf, and for today's platform, you have given us an opportunity to talk about this issue and to be able to rally like-minded partners to join us against the stopping of this crime. So really thank you for that. This month is actually the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. At IJN, we really hope to partner like-minded advocates who are passionate about justice. They want to come with us to look at sustainable transformation in lives and impact. And this can be individuals, foundations, corporations, and even government partners and businesses. We are always happy to co-create platforms, like what we have done with our previous partners, so that we can encourage discussions around the issues. We can share some of the key data that's involved to look at solutioning, and we can also customize the different ways of involvement for different parties. I would like to cite an example like what we do with like governments and businesses. For instance, we have partnered with Walmart Foundation to implement cross-border programs in strengthening law enforcement interventions and collaboration so that we can reduce trafficking and abuse in the Thai fishing industry. In our conversations with other technology and fintech providers, we have co-created initiative to look at the designing of their systems and platform so that we can make it safe by design and then we can deter and prevent child abuse online. We also hold frequent dialogues, some of which are closed door with thought leaders and our survivors so that we can discuss these wicked issues. We can also direct possible funding resources to support IJM funding needs. And we can also send rescue and restoration to the lives of those victims who have been abused. And that is really what we want to look at for all that we do. So many have also shared about IJM stories and needs. And we are really thankful for that they have leveraged their personal networks and opinion pieces to talk about such issues. I'm very proud to share that IJM has established national survivor leadership networks globally to empower a growing group of strong survivor leaders who is passionate about advocating for improvement in government policies, systems, and practices based on their lived experiences. These amazing leaders, for instance, the survivors of child abuse in Philippines, they have stepped forward with courage to talk about their stories, and they have also provided expert advice to our partners so that they can catalyze local and global action on these issues as well. I had the privilege to meet some of them, including Ruby, who is a survivor of online sexual exploitation of children. I'm really inspired by her courage, her dedication to fight alongside IJN for the cause. So if anyone would like to find out more about Ruby's journey and what can happen to children who are abused online, I would encourage them to tune in to the Finding Ruby podcast that's available on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts as well. So in summary, I just want to share that the human trafficking generates about US 236 million of illegal profits a year. And it would take about US 212 billion, right, to end human trafficking for good. So this means that there is hope in this ending of human trafficking, and it would mean the beginning of freedom and dignity for many that's to come. Sinni and I will be happy to speak to anyone who's interested to find out more about our work. And we would really appreciate the commitment from like-minded partners and volunteers who would like to share their voices against injustice
Right.
to help to build giving circles and networks for IJM. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. And one element that I think really shines through in IJM's work is the storytelling aspect of it. I think it's really powerful how IJM is able to combine both the data and being able to show how effective the work is with the stories of survivors. Another element that I was really curious about in IJM's work is the role of faith. So at AVPN, we've been working on our faith and giving initiative and observing the power of faith to mobilize communities for good and for impact. So I had a question, which was if faith values and communities do play an important role in IJM's work.
From what I've observed over the years, I think faith is a unifying force. It unites all of us in different capacities and roles to mobilize communities for philanthropy, which means it is to take action against human trafficking and forced labor at IJN. We hope that by partnering faith-based organizations, we are able to create impact in the local communities where each of us work. For instance, we partner faith-based organizations to share information and resources. We help to support victims so that they can find comfort and resilience through their own spiritual practices and support from faith-based communities. And also to organize initiatives and events to foster engagement, enable participation, and also collective action at the community level. I also feel that faith transcends national boundaries. So in that way, it has allowed IJM to advance our mission through common shared values, common shared identity, and to be able to forge international collaboration with interfaith groups. I would like to cite our partnership with the Interfaith Alliance. We're very thankful for our partnership with them and also the global network of Legions for Children, so that we work together to empower children, enable them to speak up for the issues that the children care about, and to build safe communities for the well-being of children globally.
Thanks, Ray. As we're moving into the end of our conversation today, my final question, and this is a two-parter, and I'd love for both of you to weigh in on this one, is what's next for IJM and how can other organizations support your work? And then the second part being, if you have any final thoughts for our community of social investment practitioners, maybe a key lesson from IJM's work or just something that you want to leave folks with.
For myself, I think collaboration underscores a lot of what we do, and I really would like to work with like-minded partners so that we can co-create solutions, we can look at issues deeper, and then we can find ways to address the complex issues that we spoke about, and ultimately to kind of uplift the lives of the vulnerable populations that we speak about. IJM's vision for the decade ahead is to be able to apply our production model to 45 additional locations around the world. So we'll not only just rescue millions of people, but that means that we can actually protect about 500 million people globally from even experiencing violence in the first place.
I think maybe for me, just a reminder that at the end of the day, impact is not just about the numbers and the statistics. It's actually about a way to really be able to demonstrate the transformation of the individual lives that we're trying to achieve. And so just, again, a word of thanks to you and to AVPN for having us on the podcast today. And I guess to anybody who's listening, we hope that what we've shared resonates and is helpful. And we're very happy to have any further conversations as well. Thanks, Sid.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray and Sinni. We're really inspired and proud to be able to share IJM's work. So very grateful that you both could join us today on the podcast. And I hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.